Good morning, colleagues. My name is Thabiso Pelane. I'm representing the Free State Department of Education on the subject electrical technology. Today, I'm going to present to you the amendment of the school calendar, amendments to the annual training plan on the digital electronics, power systems. And I'm going to present to you the amendment of the school-based assessment and the conclusion. The amendment of the school calendar. Term 2 is going to begin on the 29th of June to the 24th of July. And 27th to 31st July, that is school holidays. Term 3 is going to start on the 3rd of August to the 23rd of September. From the 24th to the 25th September, that is a school holiday. And then term 4 is going to begin on the 28th of September to the 18th of November. 19th of November to the 9th of December, that is when we write our final examination. Digital electronics, the revised ATP, Gr10. Week 1, starting on the 29th of June to 3 July. 5 days is allocated to it. We will be doing all the power sources. The focus will be on the following: the energy, the electrical cell, and the primary cell versus the secondary cell. Week 2, starting on the 6th to the 10th of July, 5 days is allocated. It's still the continuation of the power source. This week we focus on the following topic: the alternative energy, potential difference, and the electromotive force, and the internal resistance. Week 3, starting on the 13th of July to the 17th of July, 5 days is allocated to it. It's the continuation of the power sources. This week we're going to focus on the capacity and the power, the VA rating. And the practicals, we are going to connect the cells in series and we are going to connect the cells in parallel. Week 4, starting on the 20th to the 24th of July, 5 days is allocated to it, where we concentrate on the revisions and the practical. This week, the focus is on the revisions of the power sources and the practical to connect the cell in parallel to increase the capacity. Then you measure the voltage and the current on different loads. Okay, now we have to compare our CAPS document and our ATP to see where the difference could be. When we compare that, if you go to page 81 of your CAPS document up to page 82, you are going to realize that power sources is allocated 3 weeks and the electronic components is allocated 2 weeks from our CAPS document. And on our revised ATP, power sources is allocated 4 weeks and the electronics has been moved to term 3. Moving to term 3, term 3 will commence on the 3rd of August to the 7th of August. 5 days is allocated on the electronic components. That week, our focus will be on the introduction to electronic components, the types of components, and we are going to perform a practical where we identify and test and measure the different electronic components. Week 2, starting on the 11th to the 14th of August, 5 days is allocated to the electronic components. It's a continuation of the electronic components. This week we focus on the capacitor, where we are going to perform a practical on the calculation of charge, where Q equals to VC, and we are going to do another practical where we're going to do the calculation of the capacitance in series. And the third one is the calculation of the total capacitance in parallel. Week 3 of term 3, starting on the 17th of August to the 21st of August, 5 days is allocated. It is still the continuation of the components of electric components. This week the focus is going to be on the continuation of practicals 1, 2, and 3 that we did on the previous. And the other new practical, it is the charging characteristics of the capacitor, including the graph. Then we go to term 4, starting on the 24th to the 28th of August. 5 days is allocated to that. It is still the continuation of the electronic components. Here the focus is going to be on the protective device and the diode. Week 5, starting on the 31st of August to the 4th of September, 5 days is allocated to the continuation of the electronic components. On this week, the focus is going to be on the practicals, where we're going to do the test on the LED and the diode for functionality and polarity using a multimeter. And we are going to be taught about the LED, their symbols, and alike. Week 6, starting on the 7th of September to the 11th of September, 5 days, is allocated to logics. We start now with logics on week 6. The focus on this will be we'll be doing the introduction to the logics on that week. The following week, starting on the 14th of September to the 18th of September, 5 days is allocated to the logics. That is a continuation of the logic. This week, the focus now is also on the continuation of the logic. And week 8, starting on the 21st of September to the 23rd of September, 5 days is allocated to the continuation of the logic. This week, the focus is on the truth table and the Boolean expression. Taking our CAPS document, going to page 84 up to page 86, when comparing it with our 2020 revised ATP, we see that on the CAPS document, electronic component is allocated 4 weeks, and the logics is allocated 5 weeks, and the communication system is allocated 5 weeks. Going on to your 2020 revised ATP, electronic components is allocated 5 weeks. But this 5 weeks, you have 3 weeks in term 3, and the other 2 weeks has been moved to term 4. The logic is allocated 3 weeks, and the communication system has been removed. This means that the diode and the combination circuit will be taught in term 4. That is the continuation of the logics. Moving to term 4 will begin on the 28th of September to the 2nd of October. 5 days is allocated to the continuation of the logics. This week, we focus on the diode logics. And the practical is going to be performed with the simulation of the logic circuit using the diode logic, the AND gate, the OR gate, the NAND gate, the NOR gate, and the exclusive OR gate. Term 2, still the continuation of the logic. This week, the focus is going to be on the combination of circuits. And we're going to perform a practical where simulation of the combination of circuits using the logic ICs. These are the 2 weeks that I said has been moved to term 4. And then week 3, starting from the 12th to the 16th October, 5 days has been allocated to the principles of magnetism. There, the focus will be on the introduction to magnetism, magnetic field, and we're going to do a demonstration on the Oersted experience, the screwdriver rule, and we're going to do another demonstration on the magnetic fields around the permanent magnet using the ion fillings. Week 4, starting on the 19th to the 23rd of October, 5 days is allocated to the principle of magnetism. That is the continuation. During this week, the focus is going to be on the types of inductors and inductor cores. And a demonstration is going to be performed where the magnetic field around the coil is going to be shown using the ion fillings. The second demonstration is the magnetic field around the coil with and without a core. Moving to the 5th week, starting on the 26th of October, 5 days is allocated to the continuation of the principle of magnetism. During this week, the focus is going to be on the functional operation and the applications of relays and solenoid. A practical is going to be performed where you are going to test a relay using the multimeter. And a demonstration also is going to be performed where you wire a relay and a light with a switch to be operated with the relay. And the second demonstration is going to be performed where you wire a latching circuit with a relay. Turning to page 85 of our CAPS document and page 87, we are going to see that from our CAPS document, 3 weeks is allocated to the principles of magnetism. Now, on our new 2020 revised annual teacher's plan, 3 weeks is still allocated to the principle of the magnetism. Basically, there are no changes with respect to the content in term 4. It is only the diode logic and the combination circuits that are taught in term 4. We are finished with digital electronics. Now we move to electronics. Electronics, we take it that your first term is completed, so we're going to concentrate on the second term. The second term is starting on the 29th of June to the 3rd of July, 5 days. There we're also going to look at the power sources, where the focus is going to be on energy, electrical cell, primary cell versus secondary cell. Week 2, starting on the 6th to the 10th of July, 5 days is allocated to the continuation of the power sources. This week, the focus is going to be on the alternative energy, potential difference, electromotive force, and the internal resistance. Week 3, starting on the 13th to the 17th of July, 5 days is allocated to that continuation of the power source. This week, the focus is going to be on the capacity and the power, the VA rating. And practicals is going to perform where you're going to connect the cells in series and the cells in parallel. Week 4, from the 20th to the 24th July, 5 days is allocated to a new topic will be electronic components. This week, the focus is going to be on the introduction to electronic components. And then we're going to look at the types of components, and we are going to perform a practical where you identify, test, and measure the different components. Now let's look at our CAPS document on page 52 to page 54. Comparing the two documents, we are going to realize that from the CAPS document, the power sources is allocated 3 weeks, and the electronic components is allocated 4 weeks. Now, on the 2020 revised ATP, the power sources is still allocated 3 weeks, and the electronic component is allocated 4 weeks. But 1 week will be taught in term 2, and the other 3 weeks has been moved to term 3. Week 1 of term 3 begins on the 3rd to the 7th of August. 5 days is allocated to electronic components. The focus on this week, we're going to look at the capacitor, and the practical is going to be performed and the calculation of charge where Q equals to VC. The second week, starting on the 11th to the 14th of August, 5 days has been allocated to the continuation of the electronic component. This week, the focus is going to be on the protective devices, the diode, and the LED. Week 3, starting on the 17th to the 21st of August, 5 days is allocated to the continuation of the electronic component. And this week we're going to perform the practical to test the LED and the diode for functionality and polarity. And we are going to calculate the value of that series resistance needed to protect the LED. And then the other practical, you're going to build a half-wave rectifier using a diode and a 50 Hz supply. Practical number 4, we're going to build a full-wave rectifier using a bridge rectifier using 4 diodes. Moving to week 4, starting on the 24th of August to the 28th of August, 5 days is allocated to the communication system. This week we focus on the introduction to communication system and the radio communication, just the basic concepts. The 5th week, starting on the 31st of August to the 4th of September, 5 days is allocated to the communication system, but this week their focus is going to be on the principle of modulation. Week number 6, starting on the 7th to the 11th of September, 5 days is allocated to the communication system. This week the focus is just going to be on the radio antenna. Now if we go to our CAPS document on page 84 to page 86, comparing it with our 2020 revised annual teachers plan, we are going to see that on the CAPS document, logics is allocated 5 weeks. Communication is allocated 5 weeks as well. On the 2020 revised ATP, we see that electronic components is allocated 4 weeks. That is that 1 week that was in term 2 and the 3 weeks that is now in term 3. Communication is still allocated 5 weeks, 3 weeks in term 3 and 2 weeks is going to be moved to term 4. So this is the 2 weeks I'm talking about, week 1 and week 2 for communication system that has been moved to term 4. The first week, starting on the 28th of September to the 2nd of October, 5 days has been allocated to the communication system. This week, the focus is going to be on feed lines, and the practical is going to be performed, where you construct a simple quarter-wave vertical antenna and fit a connector to a feed line. Week 2, starting on the 5th to the 9th of October, 5 days is allocated to the communication system. This week, the focus is going to be on the radio wave propagation. Week 3, starting on the 12th to the 16th of October, 5 days, we're going to introduce the principle of magnetism. And the focus is going to be on the introduction to magnetism. Practicals is going to be performed where the magnetic fields around the permanent magnet using an ion field will be demonstrated. And we're going to teach the magnetic fields theory, and then we're going to do the demonstration of the Usted experience, the screwdriver rule. Week 4, starting on the 19th to the 23rd of October, 5 days is allocated to the principles of magnetism. There, the focus is going to be on the types of inductors and inductor cores. A demonstration is going to be performed where magnetic field around the coil are going to be demonstrated using the ion fillings. The next demonstration is the magnetic field around the coil with and without a core. Week 5, starting on the 26th of October to the 30th of October, 5 days has been allocated to the principle of magnetism. And the focus on that week is going to be the functional operation and the application of relay and solenoids. A practical is going to be performed where we are going to test the relay using a multimeter. And we are going to do a demonstration, and we are going to wire a relay and a light with a switch to be operated with that relay. And the second demonstration, you're going to wire a latching circuit with a relay. Week 6, starting on the 2nd to the 6th of November, 5 days is allocated to the principles of magnetism. This week, the focus is going to be on the introduction of a simple series DC circuit. A demonstration is going to be performed where you're going to show how the direction of rotation in a DC motor can be changed. Looking at the CAPS document on page 85 and page 87, comparing the two documents, we can see that from the docs document, 3 weeks is allocated to the principles of magnetism. On the 2020 revised annual teacher's plan, 3 weeks is still allocated to the principle of magnetism. 2 weeks is allocated to communication systems. This topic is overlapping between the term 3 and the term 4. Thank you. That was the electronics. And now we're going to move to power systems. Week 1, on the power, term 1, we take it that everything has been done and we are on par with all the work that needed to be done. Term 2 start week 1 on the 29th of June to the 3rd of July. 5 days is allocated to electronic components. This week, we focus on the introduction to electronic components. And we are going to be taught about the types of components. A practical is going to be performed where you identify, you test, and you measure the different electronic components. Week 2, starting on the 6th to the 10th of July, 5 days has been allocated to the continuation of the electronic components. This week, the focus is going to be on protective device, the diode, their symbol and the like, the LED, their symbols and the like. 3 weeks, week 3, starting on the 13th to the 17th of July, 5 days has been allocated to the continuation of the electronic component. A practical is going to be performed where you are going to test the LED and the diode for the functionality and the polarity. You are going to calculate the value of a series resistor needed to protect the LED. And you are going to build a half-wave rectifier using a diode and a 50 Hz supply. And the other practical, you are going to build a full-wave rectifier using a diode, a bridge rectifier of 4 diodes. Week 4, starting on the 20th to the 24th of July, 5 days has been allocated to the electronic components. It's a continuation this week. The focus is just on simulations. Now, when we go to our CAPS document on page 22 to page 24, comparing it with our 2020 revised annual teacher's plan, we see that on the CAPS document, power sources is allocated 3 weeks. Electronic components is allocated 4 weeks. Now, when you compare that and start to spot the difference, you see that on our revised ATP, electronics is allocated 4 weeks. And the power sources has been removed. That is the difference. Going to term 3. Term 3, the week 1 starting on the 3rd to the 7th of August. 5 days has been allocated to the domestic installation. This week, the focus is on the electrical energy distribution. Going to week 2, starting on the 11th to the 14th of August. 5 days has been allocated to the domestic installation. It's the continuation of the first week, but this time the focus is going to be on the distribution board, the protective device, the miniature circuit breakers, and the practical is going to be performed where a distribution board is going to be wired according to the SANS requirements. Week 3, starting on the 17th to the 21st of August, 5 days is allocated to the domestic installation. This week, the focus is going to be on the protective device, the earth leakage. And then week 4, starting on the 24th to the 28th of August, 5 days has been allocated to the domestic installation. This week, the focus is going to be on the pipe size, the conduits, the protective device earthing, and the pad. We will be doing the assembly and the soldering of the component on the PC board. Week 5, starting on 31st August to 4th September, 5 days has been allocated to the domestic installation. This week, the focus is going to be on testing and troubleshooting after the installation. And then we're going to be taught about our sub-circuits on the domestic installation. Week 6, starting on the 7th to the 11th of September, 5 days is allocated to the continuation of the domestic installation. This week, the focus is going to be on the alternative lighting system, the plug circuits, and a practical is going to be performed where you're going to wire 2 plugs into the sub-circuit. Week 7, starting on the 14th to the 18th of September, 5 days has been allocated to the continuation of the domestic installation. This week, the focus is going to be on the fixed appliances, and we are going to perform a practical where a stove and a geyser is going to be connected to a sub-circuit. Week 8, starting on the 21st to the 23rd of September, 4 days has been allocated to that is the domestic installation. This week, the focus is going to be on the practicals. We're going to perform a practicals where we do an insulation resistance test on a domestic installation. Number 2, the second practical, we are going to perform a polarity test on the domestic installation. And the pad, on the pad, simulation and project completed and ready for moderation. So during this week, on the 21st to the 23rd September, the moderation for your pad will be done. Now, looking at the difference between the CAPS document and the 2020 revised ATP plan, going to page 84 up to page 86 of your CAPS document, we are going to realize that domestic installation is allocated 10 weeks. On the 2020 revised ATP, domestic installation is allocated 8 weeks. Going to term 4, the first week of term 4 will be starting on the 28th of September to the 2nd of October. 5 days is allocated to the revision and the completion of the PET. Sorry. This week, the focus is on the revision, the remediation, and the completion of the PET. Week 2, starting on the 5th to the 9th of October, 5 days has been allocated to the revision and the completion of the PET. So these 2 weeks we will be doing the revision and completing our PET. This week, the focus is on revision, remediation, and completion of the PET. Week 3, starting on the 12th to to the 16th of October. 5 days is allocated to the principles of magnetism. The focus on this week is going to be on the introduction to magnetism. We are going to perform a demonstration where the magnetic fields around the permanent magnet are going to be shown using the ion fillings. On week 4, starting on the 19th to the 23rd of October, 5 days has been allocated to the principles of magnetism. During this week, the focus is going to be on the magnetic field, and a demonstration is going to be performed on the O-state experiment, the screwdriver rule. Moving to the next week, week 5, starting on the 26th to the 30th of October, 5 days has been allocated to the principles of magnetism. The types of the inductor and the inductor cause. The demonstration is going to be performed where the magnetic field around the coil using the ion filling is going to be shown. A demonstration is going to be performed again where the magnetic field around the coil with and without the core. And the functional operation and application of relay and solenoid. And a practical is going to be performed where we're going to test the relay using the multimeter. Week 6, starting on the 2nd to the 6th of November, 5 days is allocated to the principles of magnetism. On this week, the focus is going to be on the introduction to a simple series DC motor. And we're going to demonstrate and show how the direction of rotation in a DC motor can be changed. Week 7, starting on the 9th to the 13th of November, 5 days is going to be allocated to the PET moderation and the revision. This week we're going to focus on our PET, and it's going to be moderated, and the revision of our work will be done during this week. And then from the 16th to the 20th, 23rd to 29 November, 30 up to 9 December, we will be busy with exam. Now, if you look at our CAPS document on page 85 and page 87, and we compare it to the 2020 revised ATP, we are going to see that from the CAPS document, 3 weeks is allocated to the principle of magnetism, and still on our 2020 revised ATP, 3 weeks is allocated to the principle of magnetism. And 2 weeks is allocated to the revision, remediation, and the completion of the PET in term 3. And then in term 4, we're going to have our final examination starting on 19 November to 9 December. Safety in our electrical technology. We still have to wear our mask, and we have to wash our hands all the time before we touch anything. So this is just a demonstration of how the hands is washed, where you rub your hands palm to palm, and then step 2, the right palm over the left dorsum with the interlaced finger, and vice versa. And then step 3, the palm to palm with finger interlaced. Step number 4, back of the fingers to opposing palm with finger interlock. Rotational rubbing to the left thumb, clasp with the right palm and vice versa. And the last one is the rotation rubbing backwards and forward with clasp finger of the right hand in the left palm and vice versa. Now we're going to move to, I'm going to go to our 2020 revised curriculum and assessment plan on the electrical technology. This time the concentration is on grade 10. The purpose of this is to mediate the amendments of the trimmed and the reorganized 2020 annual teaching plan, including the school-based assessment for electrical technology, that is digital, electronics, and power systems in grade 10 for implementation in June as stipulated in the Circular S2 of 2020. The purpose is to ensure that meaningful teaching proceeds during the remaining teaching time as per revised school calendar. And the purpose is to assist teachers with guided pacing and sequencing of curriculum content and assessment. The purpose is to enable teachers to cover the essential core content skills in each grade within available time. The purpose is to assist teachers with planning for the different forms of assessment. And the purpose is to ensure learners are adequately prepared for the subsequent years in terms of content, skill, knowledge, attitude, and values. When we look at the digital electronics amendment to the content overview for the phase, in grade 10, term 1, amendment to the content overview for the phase, term 2, we have the basic principles of electricity, power sources, and then we have the electronic components, that is digital electronics, and then we have the logic, where we do the Boolean logic and the basic logic gates with their application. And what we have to note there, the amendment to the content overview for this phase is that communication systems, where you have to know the basic communication principles, the antenna systems and modulation. And we have the principles of magnetism, and the relevant laws. And communication system, that is the amendment overview for the phase. If we go to the amendment school-based assessment, the SBA, in grade 10, term 1, your assignment that you wrote before the school closes, it weighs 10%, and that is 50 marks. In term 2, exam has been cancelled. Term 3, we are going to have a test which has a 15% weight, and that is 50 marks. Term 4, that is your final exam with a weight of 50% out of 200 marks. Adding all this together, they give you 75%. And your exam will be structured like this. Your occupational health and safety, it has a weight of 5% from 10 marks. Tools and measuring instrument has a weight of 12.5% from 25 marks. The basic principles of electricity has a weight of 20% from 40 marks. Power sources has a weight of 12.5%, which is 25 marks. Electronic components has a weight of 15% from 30 marks. And the logic has a weight of 20% from 40 marks. Principles of magnetism has a weight of 15% from 30 marks. Communications has been removed. So adding all your percentages, you get 100% out of 200 marks. And that is that 75 that we just talked about. And then when you look at your PET, term 1, 2 simulations should be performed. That is going to be 12%. Term 2, 1 simulation is going to be performed, which is 6%. And term 3, the theoretical part of the project, part 1 and 2, excluding the manufacturing part, it gives you 7%. Adding the 7%, 6%, and 12%, you are going to get 25%. You add that 25% with that 75%, you get a total of 100. That is going to be your assessment. Moving to electronics. The amendment to the content overview for the phase. You have the occupational health and safety, the responsibility workshop rules and procedure. Tools measuring, you have to know the tools and how to use them. Power sources, basic power sources such as battery and how they operate. And then you have electronic component, the basic electronic component and how they operate. Logics, Boolean logic, and the basic logic gates with the application has been removed. Communication system, basic communication principle, antenna systems, and modulation. And then we have the principles of magnetism. Principles of magnetism and the relevant laws. The amendment to the content overview for the phase is logics has been removed. Amendment to the annual teaching plan. Grade 10 on electronics, we have power sources, electronic components, communication system, principles of magnetism. And the content that has been amended, it is logics has been removed. And then when you look at the amendment on the school-based assessment, the SBA, for grade 10, you have an assignment which weighs 10% from 50 marks in term 1. Term 2, the exam has been cancelled. Term 3, we are going to write a test of 50 marks, and it's going to weigh 15%. And then term 4, you have a final exam of 200 marks, which weighs 50%. Adding the 50, 15, and the 10, you get 75. The other 25 you're going to get from the PET. Revision of the final examination structure for grade 10. Occupational health and safety weighs 5% from 10 marks. Tools and measuring instrument weighs 12.5% from 25 marks. Basic principles of electricity weighs 20% from 40 marks. Power sources weigh 12.5% from 25 marks. Electronic components weigh 15% from 30 marks. Communication systems weighs 20% from 40 marks. And the principle of magnetism weighs 15% from 30 marks. Adding all this percentage, you're going to get a total of 100%. That one that weighs 50%, and the marks is 200 marks. Now coming to your PET, the revised practical assessment task for grade 10, term 1, you are having 2 simulations, that is 12%. Term 2, you're going to have a 1 simulation, that is 6%. And term 3, you're going to have the theoretical part of the project, that is part 1 and 2, excluding the manufacturing part, which is total to 7%. Adding 7, 6, and 12, you end up with 25. Adding it to that 75, and that is your 100% assessment. And that will be all about electronics. Now moving to power systems. The amendment to the content overview for the phase. Grade 10, the amendment to the content overview of the phase. You have the occupational health and safety, where you have to know your responsibility, the workshop rules and procedures. You have the tools and measuring instrument, where you have to know the tools and how to use them. You have to know the basic principles of electricity, introduction to the electricity as the core of the subject, and the power sources, the basic power sources such as the battery and how they operate has been removed. And then you have the electronic components, basic electronic components and how they operate. And then you have the domestic installation. Amendment to the content overview of the phase. It is the power sources, electronic components, and electronic components. Amendment to the annual teaching plan. Reorganizing the content topics term 2 to 4. In grade 10, we do the domestic installation, and then content topics amendment. In grade 10, power sources has been removed. Amendment to the SBA, the school-based assessment. Term 1, the assignment that has been given out of 50 marks, it will weigh 10% of your total mark. Term 2, the exam has been cancelled. Term 3, you are going to write a test out of 50 with a weight of 15% of your total mark. Term 4, you are going to write the final exam with 50% weight on your final marks out of 200 marks. When you look at the revision of the final examination structure, grade 10, the topic there, it is occupational health and safety. It is having 5% weight out of 10 marks. Tools and measuring instrument, it is having 12.5% out of 25 marks. Basic principles of electricity is having 20% out of 40 marks. The power source has been removed. Electronic components, 15% weight out of 30 marks. The domestic installation, this one you must really know, is 32.5% weight out of 65 marks. And then you have the principles of magnetism, which has that 15% weight out of 30 marks. And that gives you the 100% of your 200 mark for the final exam. Coming to your PET, your revised practical assessment, grade 10, you are going to have 2 simulations of 12% weight in term 1. You had it already. And then term 2, you are going to have 1 simulation of 6% weight. And term 3, the theoretical part of the project, part 1 and 2, excluding the manufacturing part, is giving you 7%. Adding the 7, 6, and 12 get 25. And then you take the 75 and you get a total of 100 as your assessment. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for listening to me, and if there is any clarity-seeking questions, I'm still on that platform where we have our group where you can ask and you can engage with me, and I'll be happy to help. Thank you very much.